All right, so in this slideshow, which is Reconstruction Ends, this is the last lesson in Reconstruction before our test. So this first slide is a political cartoon, so it is a skill to try to tell what these political cartoons are talking about. We still have them today in today's society. You see political cartoons all over the place. So we're going to ask the questions to try to, what the heck is this political cartoon talking about? So number one, what is President Grant standing in, and what does it symbolize? Well, the carpet bag, he's standing in a carpet bag, and it symbolizes Northern Republicans whom Southerners accuse of hastily moving to the South. They're carrying cheap bags, a carpet bag. These carpetbaggers, or Northern Republicans, are accused of grab power and seek wealth after the Civil War. That's what the Southerners are upset about, these carpetbaggers. So number two, what does the cartoonist mean by showing the woman carrying Grant on her back? It says the solid South. It's a woman who's chained and carrying the carpet bag. Well, it means that the South bore the burden of Grant's policies. The woman symbolizes the South, and it means the South bore the burdens of Grant's policies. Number three, why is the woman shown chained to the soldiers? Remember, she symbolizes the South. She is chained to two Union soldiers. So what does that mean? That means it reflects the status of the South during Reconstruction as prisoners of the federal government under military rule. Remember, martial law starts military rule. So remember, this is coming from a Southern sympathizer. So he wrote this cartoon. Number four, how did Grant deal with the South during his administration? Well, Grant willingly sent federal soldiers to the South to keep order and enforce the law. Some call this the bayonet rule. During Reconstruction, he oversaw the implementation in 1870 of the 15th Amendment, under which African Americans in the South helped vote many Republican reformers, freedmen, carpetbaggers, and scallywags into public office. By 1872, however, as corruption plagued the administration and voters lost interest in Reconstruction, the Solid South had begun to reverse many Republican reforms. Okay, so question number five, do you think that this cartoon is set in the South or the North? Explain. Well, I kind of gave it away, all right? It's probably set in the South. As soldiers, a tent camp, and cannons represent the presence of Northern Army in the South in the photo. So here's a tent camp. All right, here's a tent camp. There's some cannons. There's a burned out building. There's a burned chimney standing. There's sinking ships in the background. That one looks like a smokestack on its side. All right. Some ruined homes appear to be in the background. Also in the background, a ship appears to be sinking, which might symbolize the South sinking economy. Okay? So just gave you the answers to the first one. Remember, your notes that I pass out with the first lesson you should be able to fill these out during this video presentation. All right, end of Reconstruction. All right, Reconstruction legislatures tax and spend heavily, putting the southern states into deeper debt, as well as heavy spending by the federal government. Reconstruction came to symbolize corruption, greed, and poor government. White-dominated southern states blocked many federal Reconstruction policies. In addition, the Supreme Court began to undo some of the social and political changes that the radical Republicans had made. Although Congress had passed important laws to protect the political and civil rights of African Americans, the Supreme Court began to take away those same protections. During the 1870s, the court issued a series of decisions that undermined both the 14th and the 15th Amendments. Nationwide economic downturn in 1873 diverted public attention from movement for equal rights towards their wallets. Smaller banks closed, and the stock market temporarily collapsed. Within a year, 89 railroads went broke. By 1875, more than 18,000 companies had folded. The panic triggered a 5-year economic depression, a period of reduced business activity and high unemployment, in which 3 million workers lost their jobs. And really, many white Northern voters had never fully supported radical Republicans' goal of racial equality. White Southerners formed a bloc of Democratic voters called the Solid South. The Southern Bloc existed between the end of Reconstruction in 1877 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. During this period, the Democratic Party controlled state legislatures. Most local and state office holders in the South were Democrats, as were federal politicians elected in these states. Southern Democrats disenfranchised blacks in all Southern states. After President Johnson and the Democratic Party enacted a series of civil rights legislation in the 1960s for African Americans, the Southern states became solidly Republican and continues to this day. All right, Reconstruction ends. Let's talk about the election of 1867. The election of 1876 marks the end of Reconstruction. In the election, Republican Rutherford B. Hayes lost the popular vote to Democrat Samuel Tilden, who had supports of the Solid South. The electoral vote, however, was disputed. That means they didn't agree on it. Hayes claimed victory based partly on wins in Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. Those states were still under Republican and federal control. Democrats submitted another set of tallies showing Tilden as the winner in those states, and thus the winner in the presidential race. No one, even today, really knows who won those states. Congress set up a special commission to resolve the election crisis. The commission included one more Republican than Democrat and named Hayes the winner. However, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives, which had to approve the election results. Southern Democrats were willing to accept Hayes if they could get something in return. So the two parties made a deal. So that deal was called the Compromise of 1877. First of all, the Democrats demanded the withdrawal of federal troops from Louisiana and South Carolina, two of the three southern states that Republicans still governed. Second, Democrats wanted federal money to build a railroad from Texas to the West Coast and to improve southern rivers, harbors, and bridges. Third, they wanted Hayes to appoint a conservative Southerner to the cabinet. In the Compromise of 1877, Republican leaders agreed to these demands, and Hayes was peacefully inaugurated. The acceptance of this compromise meant the end of Reconstruction of the South. So if a question arises on the test, what ended Reconstruction in the South? It was the Compromise of 1877. Hang on. All right. Effects of Reconstruction. Some critics have called Reconstruction a failure, but there were some successes. Okay? The 13th Amendment permanently abolished slavery in all the states. Furthermore, radical Republicans did succeed in the passing of the 14th and 15th Amendments. Although the Supreme Court narrowed the interpretation of the amendments during the 1870s, they remained part of the Constitution. In the 20th century, the amendments provided the necessary constitutional foundation for important civil rights legislation. During Reconstruction, African Americans had founded many black colleges and volunteer organizations, and the percentage of literate African Americans had gradually increased. The memory of this time of expanded opportunities lived on in the African American community and inspired the fight to regain civil rights. Those are positive. The negatives are the failures. Okay, although radical Republicans wanted to help former slaves, they made several serious mistakes. First, They assumed that extending certain civil rights to freed persons would enable them to protect themselves through participation in the government, especially in lawmaking. However, Congress did not adequately protect those rights, and the Supreme Court undermined them. Second, the radicals balked at distributing land to former slaves, which prevented them from becoming economically independent of the landowning planter class. This is sharecropping and tenant farming. You saw this in the movie Free State of Jones 2, when they were arguing about, ain't we free or not? Finally, the radicals did not fully realize the extent to which deep-seated racism in society would weaken the changes that Congress had tried to make. And that's it for this slideshow. Okay, make sure you put these answers into your notes for this slideshow.